what do you guys want to talk?
Throwdown Nation, we are live. It is a Monday night. We are rolling on Instagram, YouTube, Twitter /X, Facebook, and Twitch. It is a rescheduled episode 145 of the Throwdown, and tonight we are throwing down with an Atlanta-based wrestler and ring gear designer, Mr. Jimmy Daryn. How you doing tonight, Jimmy?
Doing pretty good. It's one of my first nights back in Atlanta after a good bit, but I'm happy to be back here. I got back here about Thursday or so, but I'm still getting used to things.
Nice. So for those of you that are watching this live, if you have any questions or comments, just throw them in the chat and we'll either handle them as we go or do a little Q&A at the end. So we'll go ahead and get started with the first and the most obvious question, and that is, how long have you been wrestling?
In October, it will be 3 years, I believe.
Gotcha. I know that you've done extensive training at WWA4 here in Atlanta. Has that been your primary training location, or have you trained elsewhere as well?
So it's a little bit of a complicated answer, truthfully. Initially, my training did not start at the WWA4. I started my first, training up at a school in Virginia called Body by D. They have a small kind of wrestling school there. And that's where I trained for a little under a year or so. I live in Virginia. I attend college out of state, however, in the Atlanta area.
Oh, I got you.
With that, yeah, it gets kind of complicated because I am pinging back and forth between two vastly different areas. But I actually did crunch the numbers, and because of how my initial training took place and because of how often and frequently they would have to change trainers or things just got overhauled, the longest tenured trainer I've had so far has been Fox.
Gotcha.
Which I definitely think has been very beneficial for me.
Oh, absolutely. I've had a number of WWA4 people on the show, and I say it every time. Fox has got so much to be proud of.
Absolutely.
So what part of Virginia are you from?
So I'm from around the Tidewater area. I'm around the Norfolk area or so.
Gotcha. The reason I'm asking is my mom was partially raised in the Appomattox, Lynchburg area.
Okay, gotcha.
And interestingly enough, this past Friday, when I got started doing live streaming, I was initially doing similar shows, but talking to unsigned bands. I'm a hobbyist musician. And, I hadn't done a music episode in quite a while. And some old friends of mine actually were dropping some new music this past Friday. And they asked if they could come on to talk about it. And they're actually a band from Lynchburg themselves called A Day in Pompeii. But yeah, so a little bit of a Virginia connection.
Yeah.
So in terms of the early portions of your wrestling training, what was the most challenging aspect of professional wrestling for you to wrap your mind and body around?
A lot of it, I think, truthfully, has to do with the positioning, ring positioning, ring awareness, knowing where I am, and not just that, but knowing where I need to be next and how to get there and how to make it look like I'm not just going point A to point B, but I can make it look kind of organic and, I don't know, just more natural. I think that's a very difficult thing to do very well. And it's also one of those things that you're not going to get praise for it. You'll only get dinged for it if it looks bad or unnatural. But I found for the longest time that was very tricky. feeding into certain things naturally.
Gotcha. So, prior to professional wrestling, did you have an athletic background? Have you done sports in high school and such, or?
I played some sports growing up. I feel like everybody kind of does that though. But in high school, I I was on the JV football team my freshman year of high school, and I quite frankly had no business being on there whatsoever. But for some reason, I insisted on it anyways at the time because I was like 15. Um, in high school, I did a little bit of athletics. I did cross country for a number of years, and I don't think it would really apply much here. But I was also on the academic team a bit in high school. But um, I was never really an athlete per se like that. Like it wasn't always not things involved in the school at least. Um, I was always fairly athletic, but not like not like a one track kind of athlete necessarily. It was more just like if I kind of felt like it, I would dedicate myself to this for a minute or do something else with my time.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So you mentioned that you're currently a college student. What are you studying?
So I'm studying uh, a very specific major called sequential art, and that's basically like storyboards and comic books and things along that line.
Oh, that's
Um,
cool.
yeah, panel to panel kind of storytelling, essentially, which has actually been pretty beneficial for wrestling because I mean, there is a lot of bleed over, I would say, in those two departments of character work and storytelling, and it's all very visual. So understanding how, like aggressive body language and story structure and things like that, like they tend to go hand in hand quite a bit, actually.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Well, looking over at the Instagram chat, we've so far we've got quite a good turnout. We've got Brianna Franklin, who was a recent guest here on the show, Sharan White, Lady Candace, who actually is a member of that band A Day in Pompeii that we're on Friday. My wife is in there. Mary Luce 113 is in there, and No Game Unturned is in there. I know that you are also a ring gear designer.
Hmm.
How did you get into that? Was that sort of through necessity? You're sort of creating your own gear and you went from there, or how did that all come about?
So oddly enough, I've been an artist a lot longer than I've been a wrestler. I really
Hmm.
didn't watch much wrestling, even growing up, all that much. But I really didn't get back into wrestling per se until about a month before I took my first bump, which is a very rare thing that most people can say. But my roundabout answer to that is that growing up, I was an artist. I was a comic book fan. I was an artist. I was drawing superheroes and things along that line. And I had done some work in school as far as character design, and I understood some design language things. Um, and when it came time to actually eventually after so long of training, I got to a point where I was like, okay, I need to get gear, I need to do gear. And with being able to design things like that, and I also have a background for a number of years in cosplay work where I would make my own cosplays and sew things and build things out of various materials that were varying levels of comfortable, but it was able to apply myself fairly well to figuring out how to make my own gear. Um, it wasn't honestly as hard as I expected it to be. Once you get the idea down of the basic process of things like that, you start developing a rhythm that gets a lot easier to handle the more you do.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So you mentioned that unlike a lot of people that have come on the show, you really weren't necessarily a lifelong wrestling fan.
Hmm.
Um, what would you say was your earliest wrestling related memory? Again, knowing that you're not a lifelong fan necessarily, what is the first wrestling related thing you remember?
I did watch a little bit when I was younger, but I got
Hmm.
out of it after a year or so. Um, but one of the earliest memories that I have of wrestling would probably be around the earlier PS2 video games. Um, of having I think I had the first SmackDown versus Raw on my dad's PlayStation 2, and that was kind of my first initial window into wrestling. And after that, I started watching with my dad, my brother, and one of my older cousins. And I vividly remember watching on the couch as it was happening the debut of the Nexus, and watching all 7 or 8 of them come out and wreck the entire ring on Monday Night Raw, and being like, "What the hell was that?" Having that kind of reaction.
Yeah.
And I followed that kind of storyline like very closely. I remember that very well.
Yeah.
I've paid for 2 pay-per-views in my life outside of Peacock, and one of them was that SummerSlam. Yeah, I 10-year-old me was definitely very invested in that.
Gotcha. Yeah. It's interesting. So many people that I've had on the show credit the video games as being one of their first introductions to professional wrestling. So you're in very good company with that. I mean, I really find that interesting because, I've been a fan, varying levels of fandom at different points in my life, but I've been a fan since I was around 11, and I'm actually going to be 56 next week. So, I've been following this stuff for 40 plus years.
Mm-hmm.
And, and I mean, back then, we had like the Atari 2600, but that was about it as far as video games, So, I mean, we didn't really have any wrestling related video games, but, so, was there a point in your life that you can distinctly remember when you realized that you wanted to at least give this a try?
I've always kind of had an itch in the back of my brain, honestly, about wanting to be a wrestler. I don't really know why, even at a point where I wasn't invested in wrestling at all. I always kind of had this feeling of like, I think that'd be fun to give a try, something like a day class, or like you go to a 5-hour workshop or whatever, you learn to be a wrestler. Here's how you take bumps. Here's how you do something. And by the end of it, we'll teach you how to, I don't know, run a basic sequence or something like that. I don't know. Something like that seemed very, very interesting to me always. But one of the first moment I remember it being like an actual possibility was playing video games again with one of my buddies from high school. And he had invited a coworker of his that I had never met, but his coworker was a very big wrestling fan. And he happened to mention that he was going to check out a wrestling school that Monday. He was going to go. And I mentioned, I always kind of wanted to try that. I thought that'd be a fun thing to do. And he basically extended an invite to me. And so his first day was that Monday. My first day was that Tuesday. And the two of us kind of went along that journey for a good year and a half or so. I don't think he's, I don't know if he's wrestling anymore, but I definitely credit him with getting me into the whole sphere of everything here, because I definitely wouldn't have gone if it was just me on my own. And I'm really glad that I did, because I think that it fits me very well.
Gotcha. Interestingly enough, looking over at the Instagram chat, my wife actually just posted a question for you. And that is, if you could step into the ring as a wrestler with the powers or persona of a comic book character, who would you choose and why?
It's an interesting question. I feel like
my wife's an interesting woman.
It's a good answer. I feel like Spider-Man would be an easy answer there. And I mean, it's also interesting because I mean, he was in fact a wrestler for a very brief period in the comics and in the movies as well. But
Right.
I'm gonna go on a wild card answer here and say Mr. Fantastic from the Fantastic Four. I think he'd
Nice.
just make for a very interesting to watch character.
Oh yeah, with the flexibility and all of that. Yeah.
Yeah. I want to see him versus like Jonathan Gresham or something crazy like that. That sounds very fun to me.
That does sound fun, actually.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, thinking of all the different submission possibilities, that's just crazy. And KJ Valentine just dropped in on the chat.
Oh, jeez.
So what does your family think about the fact that you are pursuing your wrestling dreams? How do they feel about all of this?
They definitely get a kick out of it in some instances. I know that at first they were definitely kind of hesitant. My first day I kind of was very impulsive on signing up for it, and I pretty much told my mom, "Hey, I want to sign up for this wrestling class," and she said, "We'll talk about it when you get home." And I was like, "Well, the contract's already signed, so there's not much to talk about here. I'm doing this now."
Yeah.
And I know that she's not super crazy about the risk of injury and things along those lines, but they've been fairly open about things, fairly supportive about things. I don't know how much I'd necessarily say that they're encouraging it per se. Like, I definitely think that they'd rather me pursue something a bit safer. But for what it is, I think that they're fairly supportive about it, which I definitely appreciate.
Got you. But yeah, KJ just commented, "Mr. Fantastic with infinite rope breaks."
Oh, I didn't even think about that. That's a good point. Good point.
And Brianna Franklin wants to know who your favorite wrestler of all time is.
I really can I give like a top 5 maybe?
Sure.
Top 3
Go for
or
it.
something. This is an answer that changes all the time for me. I mean I've always loved AJ Styles. I think AJ Styles is one of the best to ever step into the ring. I really have been on a very big Kenny Omega kick lately. I've been watching a ton of him. I think he's also fantastic in the ring. Seth Rollins is incredibly talented. I've been on a Will Ospreay kick lately also, which is very odd for me to say out loud because for the longest time I was not the biggest Ospreay guy, truthfully, but he's very talented at what he does.
For sure.
And yeah, he's definitely won me over. I think he's incredibly talented. Yeah, there's a lot of guys that I'm just like. I mean, like I feel like it goes without saying, also, but I mean, I think Fox is also remarkably talented, and I'm so glad to see that he's starting to get some more mainstream opportunities the last few years and stuff.
Yes.
Because for the longest time, he was like the guy on the indies. He was the biggest unsigned talent out there.
Yep.
And to see him finally getting his due there is really cool to see.
Absolutely. I don't know that it'll ever happen, but I would love to see Ospreay and Rollins have a match. I mean, I just think that would just be sick.
they would tear the house down for sure. And I mean, I don't know, man. You never say never. I don't know if it would more likely happen at an AEW show or a WWE show, but I
Yeah.
think there's always a possibility with things like that, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah. And she actually had just a quick follow-up question. How do you feel about AJ Lee coming back?
I don't know if anybody's going to be upset about that. I thought it was great to see her back.
Oh yeah.
I didn't even find out until like 4 or 5 hours after it happened, though, because I was up working on, I think I was working on gear actually, and just didn't look at my phone for the longest time. And I checked YouTube randomly, and there was a thumbnail, like an 18-minute video, and I was like, oh, okay, that happened tonight. Cool.
Yeah.
I guess I missed that. But yeah, I'm glad to see her back. I didn't really watch much when she was around, but from what I have seen of her, I found her really likable and fun.
Yeah, my wife is actually kind of a brand new wrestling fan, and and she immediately fell in love with AJ Lee. I mean, and interestingly enough, during AJ's run was a time in my life when I was actually kind of tuned out of wrestling. So I'm not as familiar with AJ Lee as I am with a lot of other people. So to some extent, I'm kind of experiencing her for the first time myself. So outside of wrestling, what are some of your other hobbies and interests?
So I mean, I do a lot of art. I do a lot of drawing. I talked about that a little bit here, but
Yeah.
that's probably my main outside of wrestling pursuit, I suppose. I mean, I enjoy playing video games in my free time. I like I sew, and I still do cosplays from time to time, although it's not as much of a focus, unfortunately, anymore, just because I just don't have the time to dedicate to things like that all but so much. That's kind of it right now, honestly. I've been very focused on wrestling for the last 3 years or so, and somehow I've not gotten burnt out on it, which is,
That's a
again,
good thing.
yeah, it's definitely a good thing. But it's also very odd because most things like that, even things I'm passionate about, I feel like I would have burned out on them already, and I just haven't with this.
Gotcha. So, also outside of wrestling, what person inspires you the most and why?
That's a good question. Do they have to be a real person, or
No, not necessarily.
I've always held very tightly on to, comic books and superheroes and stuff. I think I'd like to say Superman here, honestly. I know that there's like a very big, or at least for the longest time, there was always the idea of like, oh, he's a very boring character just because he doesn't struggle very much and he doesn't, have much to worry about physically. But I've always really enjoyed the character. In the movie lately that came out back in July, I thought was a terrific representation of him. But I think he's a wonderful paragon of just what people can strive to be like.
Yeah.
Just it's very refreshing. Especially today, I feel like that was a movie that, like, I think a lot of people really needed right now. Just to show a character who's just a nice person for the sake of it. It's not an ideal that I can always hold up to, unfortunately, but I think that it's certainly a worthy goal, even if it isn't necessarily attainable. Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Gotcha. So, they say that the best wrestling personas are usually pretty much yourself kind of turned up to 11. So, tell us about in-ring Jimmy Daryn and kind of compare and contrast him with everyday you.
Everyday me is definitely a lot more. I'd say shy, probably. I'm very shy. I'm not very quiet, though. Usually once I start to open up with people, I get very talkative. I get very sarcastic, very, very, very loud, very frequently. And I think the main difference right now between me and my character is that my character is kind of open up, kind of right out the gate. He kind of is just opens up, and he's a loudmouth. He's a smartass. He's always kind of talking during his match. He's always saying something. Always has something on the tip of his tongue that he's itching to snap at somebody else. Um, I think there's a lot of bleed over, for sure, in myself and my character. I think it is more so just that it's not even necessarily a larger than life character I portray. It's almost more of like a more down to earth character in larger than life scenarios, which I think then kind of asks of larger than life reactions, if that makes sense.
It does. It does.
I think if you put anybody in some extreme situations, they're going to have extreme reactions. And so I think that says more about my character, I think, than really I've been able to portray, quite frankly. But I think I have the most fun when I'm working heel. I think that's where my personality tends to shine the most. I think I get the most creative, I think, when I'm working heel as well. But it's so easy to say whatever's on your mind there and not have to worry about like, oh, is that going to come off kind of mean or things like that. But
gotcha. So tell us about your very first match. What was it like? How did it go? What were your thoughts? It sounds like there's a funny story.
There's definitely a story to that one. My first match I ever worked was, I think, about 2 or 3 months into my training, which I know isn't terribly unusual at the A4 for people, but for where I was training at, it was much too early for me to be doing any of that stuff. My first match was a squash match against one of the guys who was at the school. He was a couple years in, but it was at a seminar. It was my first match was at a seminar held by an NXT referee, and I essentially went out there and proceeded to get the daylights beaten out of me for about 5 minutes. And then I took a brain buster that I told him don't give me, and he gave it to me anyways. And that was the whole match pretty much. I really did nothing but just take a few bumps. It wasn't very eventful or fun, but it definitely taught me a couple things about sometimes people aren't always going to listen to you out there. So you got to be able to adapt on your own and to put as much, I guess, impetus as you can on yourself in matches, which applies very specifically in situations like that. But I think it applies in, much more complex matches in many other different ways of just knowing when to do something and when not to do something, and understanding that maybe it's not the best to rely on your opponent to figure out the timing for something, but maybe figure it out such a way that, you can decide the timing of everything if you're in control for things like that, if that makes any sense.
It does. It does. So, we've heard about the first one. Now, if you can narrow it down, tell us about your favorite match that you've been a part of.
I think my favorite match that I've been a part of so far might be, I had a singles match with Vaughn LaFleur on an A4 Thursday, I think back at the end of May this year. And I think that, if nothing else, I think it was probably one of my best performances in a match. I was very happy watching it back with the timing I gave of things, of letting things really like soak in and marinate. things didn't feel too excessive, but they weren't so slow and boring that it was difficult to pay attention to. I took some pretty heavy bumps in that match that I probably would not take today, unless I had like 5 people chanting my name, and then I'd probably take them again, honestly. But there's a number of bumps in that were pretty heavy bumps that a lot of people I know said, "No way am I taking that." And I did it, and I was proud of myself by the end of it, for sure.
Gotcha. Well, shout out to Von LaFleur. He's another previous guest and a good dude.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you could only be one, would you rather be great in the ring or great on the mic? And that's not saying that you would have to be lousy in the other aspect. It's just if you could only be great in one of the two aspects, what would you rather be great in?
It's tricky because I definitely would like to say I'd like to be great on the microphone, but I really don't know how much it could benefit me. And that sounds like an arrogant way to say that, and I'm trying to think of how better to phrase that, because I'm not the best on the mic by any means. But I think that longevity wise, I think if you look at the top guys, it always seems to be guys who are very gifted on the microphone. Guys who can't talk are not going to be A-listers. Very rarely are they, at least. But at the same time, the number of opportunities I've had to talk on a microphone on the independents, I could count on a single hand. It's just not a muscle that you get to flex very often on the independents.
Right.
They're very match focused. They're very singular match focused. Even on telling, storytelling and stuff like that is not super common on the indies. So I think I will stick with my answer of I'd prefer to be great on the microphone, the ring. I think there are plenty of guys who are great on the microphone and just okay in the ring that are in very high levels. I don't know if there's all that many that are exceptionally great in the ring and just kind of lousy on the mic. At least not in that top level, kind of, how I see it, at least, though.
Gotcha. Well, again, looking over at the Instagram chat, shout out to Captain Dave Spieler and Cisco Soto, who have joined us. And so do you have an all-time favorite match as a fan? A match that's like comfort food that you find yourself going back to, and it never really gets old?
My favorite match of all time is from NXT TakeOver, I think Brooklyn. I think it's Brooklyn and then 25. My favorite match, though, is it's a 2 out of 3 falls match between Johnny Gargano and Adam Cole.
Oh yes.
Specifically, my favorite is the first of their 3 matches they have, but they have 3 2 out of 3 falls matches, and they are all fantastic. But the first one particularly, I think, is so well done. It's like 45 minutes long or something crazy like that, and the just everything flows and fits so well together. You can tell there's like a very strong chemistry between the 2 wrestlers in there. Things make sense, but things always have this tension that is very difficult to capture.
Right.
And I mean, those guys both were just on their A game that night. They were going crazy.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, Cole and Gargano are both just exceptional workers. I mean, both
Absolutely.
of those guys are probably, those guys would definitely be in my top 10, if not top 5. Love both of those guys to death.
Mm-hmm.
So, piggybacking onto that question, do you have an all-time favorite promo as a fan?
It's a very basic answer, but CM Punk's pipe bomb promo I mean, it was very memorable for a very good reason. Um, I have to give that one props. But honestly, I think the more I'm thinking about it, I think my favorite would have to go to MJF's pipe bomb that he cut on Dynamite. That was what happened to be a very random happenstance of I was watching wrestling with a few friends just over the internet. They'd convinced me to watch one episode of wrestling, and it was that episode. And I got to the end of that episode of Dynamite, and he pipe bomb on Tony Khan. And I credit that with like being what hooked me back into wrestling. That specific promo, because it was one of those that made me go, "Holy shit!" Like, okay, this guy is for real here, you know. And yeah, MJF is also just such a talented dude.
He is. He is. And, I've said this on multiple occasions. Something that I really dig about MJF is, he came in with these exceptional otherworldly skills on the mic.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, he was okay in the ring, but I wouldn't say he was a great in-ring worker, but he has put in the time and the work to where he is now a very good in-ring worker, as well as still being just otherworldly on the mic. So I'd love to see people, putting in the time to make their game even more complete.
Totally agree. I totally agree with that. Yeah, I was. I'd never say he was particularly bad in the ring, but yeah, I definitely think that like just watching him next to guys like Kenny Omega or Will Ospreay or other talent you'd come across in AEW, he was not a match guy per se.
Right.
And yeah, I definitely agree with you saying like he's elevated his game for sure.
Absolutely. So Don Miguel, the Don of Commentary, has joined in the chat. So we are in rarefied air. So, in your opinion, at this very moment, who are the best male and best female wrestler in the world? Again, it's a tough one.
Yeah, it's tough because I want to think about this, but I also don't want to just like sit and do nothing for like 20 seconds. So that's a good question. I think I might have to say AJ Styles still. I think that although his physicality is definitely not what it used to be, 15 years ago, I think that he is very unique in the sense that I feel like you could throw him in the ring with literally anybody and he can turn out not just a passable but like a very solid match. And I think that kind of I guess flexibility or adaptability is something that definitely marks like the talent of a wrestler. I think that if you got to match somebody where they're at, no matter what, then like that can be very hit or miss with some guys. And he's one that I think can match pretty much anybody wherever they need to be and also bring out the best in them and make them push themselves. Definitely think him for best male wrestler right now. Best female wrestler. I'm thinking right now. I mean, Becky Lynch is always, I think, a pretty impressive talent. I've always liked her a lot. I think that Tony Storm is doing, still doing very fun stuff on AEW.
Yeah.
I think that although she hasn't really gotten much she hasn't gotten a whole lot of opportunities as of late. I think that Candice LeRae is a supremely underrated talent.
Oh,
Her work,
absolutely.
her work like 10 years ago, like she was on a different level.
Oh yeah. You know, some of her stuff out in PWG and some of
Mhm.
her indie stuff is just crazy.
Yeah, she had. I know the one very very viral clip of her taking the it was the lumbar check from Cedric Alexander.
Oh yeah.
And it looked like a shotgun blast. It was brutal to watch, but I might say Candice LeRae, honestly. I think she's. I'll also throw out. I think Liv Morgan is another like really impressive star as of late. I think that she's segued herself up into a very high level um, position, which I think is very cool to see. Um, and lastly, I mean, Rhea Ripley, I feel like speaks for herself. Everybody likes Rhea Ripley. I don't know anybody who's been like, she sucks.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, something that I've said a number of times recently, and I'm going to say it again because I just love putting this out in the universe and hoping that it comes to fruition, is, now that she is in the WWE system, I am dying to see Jordynne Grace work a program with Rhea Ripley.
Oh, they'd have such a cool match on that.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that and it's one of those things. It's bound to happen,
Oh yeah.
and I'm just hoping for sooner rather than later. So, um, so, and this can be present day or past. Who would be a dream opponent for you? Who would Jimmy Daryn love to have the opportunity to share a ring with?
I would have loved to have shared the ring with Bret Hart.
Hmm.
I think that he's a one of the best of his generation for sure. And I think that I know he's got some very strong opinions about wrestling today, but I feel like
Yeah.
finding a middle ground between what he used to work and something like more akin to today's style. I think that he'd still be one of the best in the business today. Truthfully, um, I think that Bret Hart is he lives up to the hype. Best there is, best there was, best there ever will be. I think I'll stick with that answer. Just because I don't want to answer AJ Styles for a third question in a row like that. But
Gotcha.
Bret Hart for sure. I think would be a very fun one to.
Gotcha. So, of your cohorts out on the indies,
Mm.
who has the best walkout? Who of your cohorts, who has the best presentation of themselves as they're coming to the ring?
I think Rico Gonzalez has a really awesome entrance. He's got a really awesome entrance. And I got to say also, um, I mean, Chainmail and Grayson Pierce both love him or hate him. Every time they come out, they get a pretty solid reaction, which I think is at the end of the day, like that's your goal, is to just like get any kind of reaction. If you're coming out to just dead air, it's the worst feeling in the world, man. It sucks so much.
Yep. Love you or hate you, as long as they don't forget you.
Just feel something, please.
So, what is your favorite move? What is something you just really enjoy doing? And on the flip side of that, is there a move that you won't do or you would at least rather not do? And that can be giving or receiving.
I mean, it's a very simple answer, but I am a sucker for a really clean drop kick. I think that if you're doing your drop kicks right, they can look like they can look devastating if you're really doing them right. And then as far as moves that I just refuse to take or give, I'm not. I'm not a huge suplex guy. I'm not the kind of person that's going to be throwing guys around. I don't know how much of that is necessarily a personal taste thing, or just also just the simple fact that I'm my size, and I'm not going to be throwing around people like Herculon Rage or whatever. German suplexes, I'll say. It's not that I refuse to take German suplexes, but every time I take a German suplex, I always land a little bit funky. I think that's just how I am, though. I think that's just how I take them. Yeah, I mean, there's probably a handful of moves that if I watch them or whatever, I'd be like, there's no way I'm taking that. But I mean, at the A4 especially, also like that's broken. There's a lot of barriers that have been broken down for me, at least as far as things like that are concerned. For the longest time, I was like, dude, I'm never taking a pile driver. That's stupid. I could paralyze myself. And now I understand how they work, and I'm like, okay, like I'll take a pile driver for free on a Thursday. I've taken pile drivers on chairs before. I've taken flip bumps to the outside onto the floor and some ridiculous things like that where it's just like, ugh. Yeah, German suplex is always kind of. Actually, I'm going to change my answer. I hate chops. Chops are the worst. Chops are the worst. If I could never take any move ever again, it would be chops. I will take anything else over that.
Yeah, I'm not a wrestler, so I can't speak from personal experience, but just looking, at a chop heavy match and just seeing these guys' chests afterward, and it looks like raw hamburger. I mean, it's just wow.
It sucks so much, man. It sucks so much.
Yeah.
One of my first initial things when I first started my training was that my school up in Virginia, for whatever reason, I don't know why the hell this was a thing, but they had an initiation thing, like a fraternity almost, of if you want to train to be a wrestler, you've got to go through Chop Shop, which is where they put you in the corner, and then everybody in the class lines up and gives you 2 chops each. I took, I think, 18 chops or something, all back to back from 9 different people. And of course, they're rotating out every 2 chops. So they're all as hard as they can throw. It's not like, taking a bunch from one person isn't a walk in the park either, but there's fatigue and things like that are going to set in eventually.
Right.
And that just does not happen with people rotating out. It was horrible. The shower after that night was very, very uncomfortable. Wearing a shirt after that, even, because anytime you'd move, you'd feel your chest hairs move, and you'd feel them in your skin there, like physically moving in your raw chest, and it was excruciating. Ugh.
No doubt.
Would not recommend.
So, you've been doing this long enough that I'm sure this applies to one degree or another. So I'll ask, what hurts right now?
I've got a toe injury that is not really going away. I think that'll probably be my answer right now. My back isn't too bad. My neck isn't too bad, which is definitely 2 things that I'm very happy about. Because I know that those are usually 2 things that really catch up on people. But yeah, I've got a foot injury. I've had a couple foot injuries actually, that just kind of nag a little bit. They're not ones that tend to really go away all that much, honestly. Yeah. Other than that, though, I'm really not that bad off right now.
Gotcha.
I had a shoulder bothering me a couple days ago, but that I think has subsided at this point, which I'm very grateful for.
Gotcha. Well, KJ is saying that he agrees with you about the chops. He says he's tired of them. New move, please. Chops every match is his new pet peeve.
Good answer. Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. I like forearms personally. I'm a forearms guy. Um,
So, what is the worst bump you have ever taken?
on purpose or
Uh, Either. I mean,
does it? Okay, I'll probably have two answers then, I suppose.
okay.
Well, I did. I took one bump one time. I took a flip bump into the corner one time, and I ended up chipping a tooth from it. And
Okay.
that one sucked. But that didn't hurt necessarily too much. That was more just like if I hadn't chipped my tooth, then like I would have been fine.
Yeah.
My main answer that comes to mind though was last year. I was in a 10-man scramble, I think, and I ended up hitting in this match a tope dive to the outside, a front flip over the top rope, and I ended up just not getting caught by anybody. I just flat backed on the
Hmm.
outside there, with a whole lot of people watching there that definitely should have been doing their jobs. I was very frustrated about that one. And then immediately after I laid there for a couple seconds, and then a second round of dives came where another dude hit a tope and then proceeded to land me. Um, that one sucked. The actual bump itself was awful, but I had some adrenaline going at least there. But just getting landed on like that
Oh, yeah.
might have been worse, honestly, because I felt like, oh, it's over. I'm okay right now. But it's the ones that catch you off guard like that sometimes.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I think that covers most of mine. I took one
Okay.
that was a swanton off the apron, where I took that to the floor. That one didn't tickle, but I think the other two definitely take the cake.
Gotcha. So, what is your take on the role that social media is playing as a promotional tool in wrestling, specifically indie wrestling?
I am probably not the best person to ask about that because I have not been great with my social media. Um, I do know that I have a number of friends who have some fairly large followings on social media, though, um, that are definitely reaping benefits from that. Um, it's definitely helping with support and getting, just generally getting eyes on you. Um, I know that there's a lot of people up in even WWE and things like that that are looking specifically at like follower counts for people for getting tryouts and things like that, of just who has a built-in audience already. Um, and it's tricky getting an audience going like that, especially if you are like me and you feel very boxed in, I guess, on what you should be focusing on. Um, that's something I definitely need to work on myself. Is just breaking down the idea of like it needs to be wrestling centric. It needs to be this and that, and it really doesn't. It really doesn't at all. You just need to be posting just stuff, just anything really, of like, this is what I am doing. I don't know, things like that.
Gotcha.
Um, yeah, I don't have too much insight on that one, truthfully.
Gotcha. Well, knowing everything you know at this point in your life, if you could give any advice to your younger self, what would it be?
Start watching wrestling sooner. Definitely that. Definitely that. Because yeah, I mean, especially that first year or so of training, I had no idea what people were talking about with some of the most basic things of just like, I don't know who that is. I don't know who Kenny Omega is. I don't know what a one-legged angel is. I don't know who Will Ospreay is. I don't know what any of these things are. Like, I'm lucky I had a buddy there with me who had watched wrestling all his life, because I was able to check with him and be like, okay, what are they talking about with this? Um, and even still, sometimes I'll catch myself going like, I don't know what the hell that means. I don't know what move you're talking about right now. Um, things like that. Just some blind spots I've got still that are just like, I'd really like to not have those.
Gotcha. So, do you have any pre-show traditions? Any things that you try to do consistently before you walk through the curtain?
I really don't have that much. I mean, I like to be able to walk my matches, but I don't do that all the time. I I look at that more of a privilege than a necessity, um, even sometimes to my detriment. But I very rarely have enough time to take care of many pre-show traditions. Usually, I'm putting my gloves on or something as my music is playing, um, and I'm just that kind of like rest. I'm just that kind of guy of just roll with it and let's go and take care of things, and how they go is how they go. But in my experience, and I definitely am like an overthinker for sure. I think that the more I think about things like that before my match, the more likely it is for something to get screwed up, and then things, that's when things go off the rail big time.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So, just kind of a quick rundown. What all do you carry in your gear bag? And do you carry anything unusual or unique?
I've got a throwaway water bottle usually. Um, I've got a few pairs of kick pads. I've usually got a pair of training kick pads, and I've got a pair of show kick pads. I have my show kick pads right here actually, because I've been taking these apart. They started wearing down over the last couple days or so, and so I tried to take them apart and fix them up, but I don't think that's gonna work here, and so I'm just making a new pair right now, that are basically this design all over again. But I've usually got 2 or 3 sets of kick pads in there. I've got my I've got my standard gear tights, and I've got my first set of gear tights without any logos or names on them, because I know that that is also something sometimes where you might be on a show or like have a then, and they'll go, hey, like get your gear at a match or something, and you put on your tights, and I mean it's probably not as much the case now, but even still, um, they might look at the back of your tights and go, that's too similar to somebody we got on our roster. If you don't have anything else, we're going with somebody else or something like that. And I do not want to be the kind of person that's going to be losing opportunities like that.
Gotcha.
Because of something stupid like that. So I've got something back there just in case.
Something nice and generic.
Yeah, real nice. It's literally just my tights now, just like more generic. Yeah, I've got those in there. I've got a few pairs of gloves and some bicep bands and I got some wrist tape, I think, in there too. Various things that just like something I can put on my arm so that I don't look bare and naked and weird from the waist up. Trying to think if I got anything particularly weird in there. Sometimes I got ankle weights in there, which is a bit odd. I usually just use those during work. And for a little bit, I used them during an entrance, and they were too uncooperative. So I axed doing that. But yeah, I think that covers most of my things. I mean, I got a pair of running shoes in there. I keep specifically in there because that is what I wear with my gear. I used to wear wrestling shoes, and eventually I just switched over to wearing running shoes just because they were a lot easier on my knees, particularly with like outside dives and things like that. Of just, because wrestling shoes are so just flat and no support to them and everything. That covers about everything I think I keep in my gear bag, though.
Gotcha. So, in the coming up on 3 years that you've been wrestling, do you have a favorite venue to wrestle in?
I have really enjoyed getting to wrestle in either venue that DWA has run in, Dynamic Wrestling Association. Their Bruce and Infused shows and their Wild Wing Cafe shows are both very fun locations to wrestle in. I'm a very big fan of wrestling shows that can run in unique venues. One of my favorite things to do as a wrestler and to watch as a fan is seeing, matches take place in venues like that where maybe there are some odd, uncharacteristic things about it that you can then take advantage of in your wrestling match. Things like where like you might see a big guy versus a high flyer in a venue with a low ceiling, and the high flyer gets tossed through the ceiling or something for the cutoff or something like that. Something absurd like that, or somebody jumps off a balcony in a specific area you can make a landing in, or things like that. Things like that are always very interesting to me. Seeing how people play with environments and do unique things like that. I think that taking advantage as much as you can of the uniqueness of your match is one of the best things to do. That's how I feel, at least personally.
Gotcha. Well, something that we've done in all of these that's just been kind of fun is we let the current guest pose a question for the next guest. And so my previous guests were these two wrestlers from the Orlando, Florida area, Kid Kuda and Reese Maddox. And the question that they posed is, what is your favorite brand of ramen?
Of ramen?
It's a very random question.
I got to research my brands here real quick. Hold on. I'd know it if I saw it, but off the top of my head, I don't. I mean, I'm not picky about my ramen. If it's probably the Nongshim Spicy Shin ramen. I think that would be my answer.
Gotcha.
They're pretty cheap and they're pretty solid, I think. Top Ramen also. Top Ramen's good. I used to get that a lot a couple years back.
Yeah, they were top ramen guys, and they were very, very much against cup of noodles.
Valid. Fair.
So, knowing that this is part of a series, do you have a question you would like to pose to the next guest?
Yeah. What's the worst set of gear you've seen? I think I'll go with that. I think what's the worst piece of gear you've seen or set of gear you've seen?
That is actually a really good question. How would you answer that?
I don't like dogging on people too much, but I have seen some ridiculous things at shows before. I saw one of my friends duct tape his boot together for a show, and that was probably one of the craziest things I've seen as far as gear goes. I mean, I think there's just always somebody at every indie venue and stuff who's got the cowboy gimmick and they just show up in blue jeans. That always kind of irks me. I'm not gonna lie. Being a gear maker, at least, like, I'm very snobbish about that. I'm not gonna lie about things like that. But yeah, seeing people just pull up and just like very, very lazy, I guess, things like that can kind of irk me at times. But there's other people that make it work. So, there's always a way. Yeah, I think it's a lot in the attitude too. I think it's a lot in like the confidence of people.
Yeah.
Because I'm not thinking about that when I'm watching John Cena,
Yeah. So we're pretty much at the end of things now. So do you have any upcoming shows or anything at all that you would like to give some hype to?
I don't have anything on the docket right now. I'm just trying to get back into the scene of Georgia right now. And so that's my main focus right now. I was just at EPW this past weekend. That was a very fun show. I really enjoyed that. I'm going to be making the rounds on a few other shows, I think, in the next week or so. I plan on being at, I believe Deadlock is running this Sunday, and I'm going to try and get to that. I'm going to try to it. There's a Firestar this weekend I think I'm going to try and get to. Yeah, I don't have a whole lot of upcoming stuff though, unfortunately. Looking to make that change though. Yeah.
Gotcha. Well, as far as what we've got coming up on the Throwdown, this Wednesday, 2 days from now at 7 p.m. Eastern, I've got episode 152 coming up, and my guest is going to be a wrestler based out of the Kansas City area, the Ultimate Diva Izzy B. And she is actually a graduate of the Black and Brave Wrestling Academy and is trained under, Seth Rollins, Merrick Brave, and Matt Mayday out in Davenport, Iowa. And she's making a name for herself on the Midwest scene and is starting to branch out into some other regions. So, she's definitely an up and coming name, and I'm definitely excited to have her on. And then next Monday, the 15th at 7 p.m., I've got episode 153. And my guest is going to be another WWA 4 guy, Atlanta-based pro wrestler, Big Protein CB43. And he seems to really combine a power game with some finesse that you wouldn't necessarily expect out of a man his size. So I'm definitely excited to have him on. And then next Tuesday, the 16th at 7 p.m. Eastern, I've got episode 154. And my guest is going to be fellow wrestling podcaster Chris Page of CCP Podcasting. He is also heavily focused on spreading the word about the indies worldwide. And we actually have some ongoing and future collaborations in the works. I'm actually going to be on Chris's show this Thursday. So I'm going to be a guest on his, and then next week he's going to be a guest on mine. So we're sort of doing a little bit of a, I don't know if the word is talent exchange or what, but we're going to basically hang out and nerd out about wrestling. So anyway, that's what's coming up in the immediate future, but I'm actually booked up pretty much through most of October at this point. And I've got some exciting stuff coming up, some of which I can talk about, some of which I'm kind of waiting until things are a little more set in stone. But be watching my socials because there's some really cool stuff coming up. So before we wrap this up, Jimmy, do you have any final words for the audience? Any things you'd like to say?
I really don't have much to say. I don't think at this point, which is very weird because I've always got something to say, but I think I've said most of what I'd like to say here at least. I appreciate you for letting me come on here and stuff. I apologize again about the technical difficulties last. I'm glad that this one ran pretty smoothly.
Me too. This has really been a blast, and definitely thank you for your time.
Yeah, of course.
And so until Wednesday night at 7 p.m. with the Ultimate Diva Izzy B, be good to each other.